Well, cool. Well, it's good to be back with everybody on the No Neutral Moments podcast. My guest, I was trying to think, Dustin Pearce this morning on the way here. When did we first meet? Was it 12 years ago? 13 years ago? I mean, Chapman was playing Little League Baseball.
That's right. Chapman had just finished his 6th grade year.
Okay.
They were the North Central champions.
Yes.
Playing in Big Spring. I remember, well, I'd met you at camp, and then we had the Little League. So, man, that had to have been 2010.
Wow.
2010.
Or something close to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I started at the church you pastored in 2010, August of 2010.
Okay, and so before August of 2010, give everybody a little rundown. You were a budding sports broadcaster trying to make it to ESPN.
Yes. So I decided I'd always had a journalism desire.
Right.
But in college, it was like, man, this TV thing's kind of cool. So I did an internship with the Brewers, with the Milwaukee Bucks. And then I knew, man, in order to make it in TV, you got to go to small markets.
Wait, so you did an internship? I've never known this.
Oh, you didn't
with
know
the
this?
Brewers and the Bucks?
And the Bucks.
So Milwaukee thing here.
Yeah, because I went to college in Wisconsin, and so we did the Brewers in the summer, and I worked for Fox 6 out there in Milwaukee. Got to go to all the Brewers games. Then in the winter, I had to do another internship for my degree. So I hit up the Bucks, and I ended up working in their radio department and helped them
Who
cut
were the best
video.
players you covered in those two teams?
Man, Michael Redd was the Buck at the time. A lot of people don't know him, but the Bucks were really struggling. They haven't been good until lately, right? And with the Brewers, let's just say there really wasn't anyone at that time. And my experience with the Brewers was getting yelled at by their manager, trying to interview, being a zealous young reporter, and I think I asked him, hey, so did you spend your off day getting ready for the Reds, or did the off day help you prepare for the Reds? That's the question I asked. This dude looked at me in a dugout. That's where you do all the interviews. And he goes, who's this guy? Who brought this guy? And I'm like, man, I'm just sorry. What are your thoughts on the Reds? And then he answered the question normally. But from there, man, I told my dad when I graduated college, I said, I want to get in TV. I've got to start in a small market. So he flew me out to Abilene, which is where our family was. And walked in, got hired that day.
At what station?
It was KTAB. It's the CBS.
Okay, in Abilene.
In Abilene. Was a sports reporter, weekend sports anchor there for about 2 years. And then in 2008, moved to Midland to take the sports director role Monday through Friday.
Right.
Did that for a couple of years and then
Making
transitioned.
about nothing?
You want to know what I started at? $15,000. That's what I started
For a
at.
full-time job?
Full-time job. It equivalated, I think, people at McDonald's at the time were making more. I'll never forget that phone call with my dad. Hey, Dad, got hired. Oh, that's awesome. What are they paying you? $15,000. And he just didn't say anything for
Silence.
like a few minutes.
I've raised an idiot.
Yeah, he goes, you do realize you have a lot of student loans, a lot. And but you work through it, and you learn what it's like to be poor and to live on nothing. And,
Okay, now, and this is nowhere I intended to go, but it's fun before we get into maybe something else. When did you start calling the high school football games?
So
the Midland High School football
my
games.
TV career ended in 2010.
Okay.
And I think it was actually that fall.
That's when you came on at Stonegate.
Came on at Stonegate, August of 10.
Right.
And I want to say it was that fall I got a call from a guy we both know, Robert Hallmark. And he was just asking me to fill in a little bit. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So I filled in for a few games.
And this is Bulldog and Rebel football.
This is Bulldog and Rebel
on
football.
AM 550.
Right. This is, if we have an opening, we need your help.
Right.
2011 is when I think he asked if I could do it more in a full-time capacity, which is when I roped you in.
Right. And just to be clear, in Robert's defense, he would even say he's not a football guy.
No.
Like just
no.
he's a radio
guy.
talk show hook.
He's a long time radio guy.
Yeah.
Understands the business in and out, but when it came to sports, that's not his thing.
First and 10.
Yeah.
First and goal.
You'll never forget that, will you?
Never forget that story.
You will never forget that. So, and then I remember, and I didn't have to try too hard to convince you to join me. And you did it for how long?
What is it, 4 years maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe 5?
Yeah.
What was my first game, the one at the Arlington, or did we do it here? No, it was Arlington.
Yeah.
You said come to a playoff game.
Yeah, you did a playoff game, and then the next
Robert
season
came.
you joined me in a more full-time capacity.
Right. It was Arlington Martin, and Midland High, I believe.
at the stadium.
The stadium, and I think we were sitting at the highest possible place.
It's the wildest thing I've ever seen.
That was a terrible stadium.
Yeah, the press boxes that they give us access to, they weren't the press boxes. We're in the corner of the end zone.
Yeah, I'm listening to the OU play-by-play guys on a talk show in Oklahoma City that I've actually talked to them and called in and had conversations with them, and they were making comments about the worst place to call a game.
And that was it?
And even for them. And I was like, yes, that's the worst place ever to call a game. Wow. And so then we just started traveling all around West Texas.
We did.
Calling football games, man.
And then we got to a place to where you took one team and I took a team.
And off we went.
And it was fun.
It was kind of fun. I mean, we got to meet some great athletes. So I'll tell one funny story. So we're calling a game. And the team that always was the end of the season for Lee was South Lake Carroll, right? Yeah. So we go to a game in the Fort Worth area. I forget the name of the city we were in. And it's freezing cold. It's raining. And your booth, it's a nice stadium. And the booth, has glass in front and it's fogging up and all this kind of stuff. But at the time, South Lake Carroll's radio crew was the Dallas Cowboy crew, right?
They had the Dallas Cowboy engineers and recording. Yeah.
And they had the full spread. Remember, they had all the catered food in. And they had this guy who was the play-by-play guy for South Lake Carroll.
Oh, yeah.
And he was just a piece of work.
What did we call him?
Well, on air, because he comes in during our halftime show, because we had a squeegee. Literally, that's how wet it was on the inside of the squeegee for our windows. And he walks in, we're doing our halftime show. Can I borrow your squeegee? And we looked at him and just said, get out of here. Yeah. And then he walks out and I said, ladies and gentlemen, Ron Burgundy just came into our studio.
It was hilarious. I've never in my life seen a high school football team have that attention to their media.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
I mean, it was like a D1 football program.
Yeah, it really was.
I mean, and they played like it too, but...
Yeah. Got to see some great players, man.
Man, it's fun. And even to this day, I still get to do it.
Yeah.
So it's a good time. For me, it's just, and we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, in our conversation. For me, it's a chance to still be in the sports world without being in the sports world.
Right. Well, you probably get paid more for doing these radio shows than you did for your first gig as a sportscaster.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
It is. It is.
That's cool.
No, it's very cool.
Well, so you came on at Stonegate Fellowship. For people who don't know, we planted this church in '99 in Midland. And it was growing fast. And then Dustin shows up, and you pretty much just go into our youth ministry. And were you going to seminary at the time?
No, so I made that transition from TV to ministry. And literally, that was the wildest transition ever because that was not on my radar.
Right.
But, the Lord had radically changed my life about 3 years before that.
Right.
And so when the rug got pulled out of my feet in the TV business, and I really transitioned because I went to Stonegate's camp.
Yeah.
Remember that? I was a volunteer. 2010, and some things were happening. And at the time, I thought the only way to really follow Jesus, which I think we'll talk about more, was just to go into full-time ministry.
Right,
so I did that. It's kind of similar to your story.
Exactly. Leave it all.
I didn't realize that you could be a Christian in sports broadcasting and influence change. But, yeah, so, man, I did that. And then I think it was about 2012, you guys got me started in seminary and was able to press forward and finish that up in 16.
And you did that all online? Traveled back and forth?
I did a bit of a hybrid. So I would do some online. And then for a season there, me and Jeff Turner, we'd fly
or were you in Fort Worth?
We'd fly to Dallas every Monday, and then kind of made a transition there, and then I would fly to Louisville and do like week-long classes, like a hybrid kind of a thing.
Right.
Go to class all day for a week straight, come back.
So who did your official MDiv come from?
Southern Seminary.
Okay, just make sure it was the right seminary.
Yeah, same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so let me just kind of, so you run that course.
Right.
You and I had an incredible experience at Stonegate. We had just thousands of kids going to camps and seeing change and seeing just amazing things happen. And then I make a change and go into this retirement mode and go back into another direction. And then tell a little bit about how your story changed.
Yeah, I think for me it was really probably what a lot of stories will be is it happened in 2020 for me. And I think there was this, I say restlessness, but I was just kind of not necessarily searching for more, but felt like I was being released to go a new direction. Couldn't really put language around that at the time. But then when everything got shut down, for me, it was just really a chance to go, okay, what's next? And on the other side of it, we just realized that it was time for us to go and do something different. Nothing for me was out of angst. Sure. Nothing for me was out of, any negative feelings as much as I just think I was being released to do something different.
When do you think you started sensing that?
That for me, I could trace that back to 2018. And which is right about the time that you left. And I don't think it was directly correlated with your leaving as much. In me, I just remember this feeling like, man, is my job just to beg kids to show up to this building? And after a while, it kind of started feeling like that a little bit. And then I think the Lord was just, again, to use some of your language, challenging my paradigm over and over and over. And then 2020 is when it really got just completely unraveled and moved into another direction.
Do you feel like, so I grew up kind of in church.
Right.
Never knew what it was to go to a small church. I mean, every church I was in was huge, had television, radio, big personality pastors, had schools and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And when we started Stonegate, there seemed to be, I don't know if it was a paradigm shift. This is back in the 90s. So you're in elementary school or wherever you are. And the saying was, nobody's attracted to the church. Nobody's attracted to what the church is doing. We don't seem, what's the word? Relevant. We don't seem relevant. And I apologize for this cough. So when we started Stonegate, I mean, in all innocence, I remember us thinking, we just want to be really excellent at what we do. Let's do great music. Let's do great kids ministry and all this kind of stuff. And you see what happens. I mean, children show up with their parents. Parents show up. Yeah. All of a sudden, you got thousands of people on campus. We're legitimately seeing people's lives change. I would say you rolled in during what I would call almost the apex of where we were.
Absolutely.
And really on this trajectory, this fast trajectory. But for me, I can go back to journals, and it felt like around 2013 or 14, in my soul, there was just something saying, okay, hang on a minute. Something's still not right. Like and then I started realizing through the men's Bible study we did, all these guys are leaving and living out in the world. Yes. And we're doing everything in this corner. Yes. We're telling everybody to come to our place, the fourth place, so to speak. And there's just got to be something different. I mean, and then you realize how stage-centric it becomes, as hard as we tried. And so I don't think any time was wasted. I think it's, a season for this, a season for that, as Ecclesiastes 100%. Tells us. But something shifted. And I think COVID sort of exposed the foundation wasn't as deep as we thought. Our intentions were correct. Our strategy was off, and something needed to shift. I mean, how do you feel about that? What does that stir in you? Because now if somebody said, would you go back and do it again? The answer is flat out, no. No. Not even a chance.
Yeah. I have to think about that, because one thing I always tell people, and I have these conversations all the time, and I'm sure you probably do too.
Yeah, and when I say do it again, I don't regret.
No, and that's where I was going to start. Right.
It was the right thing at the right time, so we thought.
Right. I tell people all the time, I'm like, man, that season of my life at Stonegate was life-changing. And I saw a lot of life change happen.
We did.
Real transformation. I mean, I'm just ran into a kid at the coffee shop this morning who, Avery. Yeah. Sitting there reading his Bible. He's in Bible school. Just, I mean, cool things, seeing the fruit of some of that. But I look back and I'm like, man, I've got no beef with that past. I think it was great. None. I think God was good. I think you guys, you, Neil, a lot of guys really poured into my life, developed me. But when I look back at that season, I'm like, again, similar to you, I'm like, that was a season. And I don't think I could be in this current season if I didn't have that season.
If we hadn't gone through that.
That season opened my eyes. I'm sure it opened yours
totally.
to this current season. It was interesting. I was revisiting this book. Had you ever read Tribes by Seth Godin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bruce Lowe turned me on to that book when he was our missions guy.
Well, there's a section where he talks about the factory mindset. and how the factory mindset just pervaded America. And then I was reading some other guys who talked about how that factory mindset really, just infiltrated the church.
Right.
And so what I think you and I experienced, and what I'm seeing now on the flip side, is try as hard as we did to get people to be outward and to, advance the mission. What happens is there's this deep passion for building security for the Christian subculture that have been built. As hard as you try to fight against that, it's like the factory mindset creeps into the church. So what do people do? Systems, programs, personalities, all the things, and you build this little world where people don't ever have to leave it.
Right.
You can stay inside the bubble, and it's a great world.
You build a Christian worldview.
That's exactly
to live
right.
within.
That's right.
Rather than a worldview that causes you to be a Christian in the world.
That's right.
Right.
So what happens is my passion is now for building security within the Christian subculture. I want to stay within this safe place because I feel like Christianity happens at the facility rather than my Christian life is lived outside of the facility.
Right. That was the factory mindset.
That's exactly.
This is my Sunday thing. This is my Wednesday thing. These are all the things I do. These are the safe people I know.
That's exactly right.
And then Monday through Friday, I go to work.
That's exactly right.
I have this separate life where everything is labeled as Christian, which is a word I despise.
Exactly.
Like I cannot stand the word Christian.
Well, it's only in the Bible like 3 times.
Yeah, and the first time, that's the crazy thing is, they were called Christians, because the world was watching them, and says these people look like this Jesus guy.
Exactly.
So we'll call them Little Christ.
Little Christ.
I mean, like the culture has to label it. And I'm in this conversation the other day with some people, and they were talking about Christian music. Well, that immediately just sets me off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why don't we, as followers of Jesus, create beautiful art, create beautiful music, and then let people label it? And if they ask you, why do you do that? Because I think our Creator is exalted by the beauty of the things we do and the beauty of the things we say.
Right.
But instead, we have to have Christian politicians, Christian artists, Christian singers, Christian schools, and now everybody, and Christian businessmen, rather than businessmen and businesswomen who are living in such a way and putting on such a show, so to speak, that people go, what would I label that? But we want our label to be respected. Drives me crazy.
Well, and I think for me, what I really realized, and I didn't have any of this language until the last few years, because you know how it is. You come out on the other side and you're just trying to catch your breath.
Yeah. You don't realize how deep in it you actually were, as hard as you tried not to be in it.
You kind of have to go through almost a soul detox in a way where you're just like, okay, like, again, nothing was inherently bad, but I'm just like, man, I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, wow, I
was in it.
I was in it. I was in it deep. And coming out on the other side, what I'm seeing is it's like, function follows form. So I think it's the form of what we're doing when you have primarily a come and sit environment where it's all built on coming, sitting, listening, taking in. But for the most part, people can cling to anonymity. They can just consume and leave, or they can, going back to just old language we talk about all the time, they can check a box, knock it off their list, and then they move on.
Right.
And I'm seeing that oftentimes in my experience from the way we used to do things is we would fight for these forms that frustrate us, but really the answer is to change the form.
And as another way of saying it, structure determines behavior.
Exactly. We're saying the exact same thing.
And your structure has this place. Do you remember the arguments we used to have? And when I say arguments among the staff, these were just viewpoint debates.
Right.
Remember when we used to always have these discussions about discipleship? And there was part of us that thought, well, it's everywhere you go. It's every conversation you have. And there's this other side that's it's very structured, very formed, very book-oriented. You're like, well, hang on a minute. This is supposed to be as you go. And you just don't realize, I'm going to press back into that issue you just said. You don't realize, as hard as you try not to be a part of the subculture structure, when you get out of it, I don't know how it's been for you, but I know how it's been for me. I've been gone for 5 years. It takes a long time. Back in 96, I go to seminary and full-time. So from 96 to 2018, we are in it, and we're fighting it, and we're doing stuff around the globe. And then for about the first year or two, when you're out of it, that's a good word. You're almost detoxing.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to get it out of your system and not think that you're guilty of something bad outside the structure that you became a part of.
Right. Right. And so we've moved into more of a house church model is really where we've gone. And so I think the hard part for me early on in that, and I can talk more about, what we're doing as a church later, but was just this mindset to where I was evaluating everything. Because, of course, excellence is a good thing. We want to be excellent. We want to honor the Lord in everything we do. But there was still this mindset where I was trying to programatize everything.
Right.
Rather than, hey, man, what if you engaged with people, built relationships, encouraged, challenged, and then sent people back out into wherever their unique sphere of influence is.
Right.
And so the Lord has done quite a bit of work in me. Like, let's move past just the programs and the monologues and let's dialogue. Because, when you really look at what you see in the early church, I mean, do you see monologues? 100%.
Yeah.
But you see a lot of dialoguing.
But you only see monologues in the book of Acts.
That's right.
Once you get out of Acts.
Yeah.
It's just letters to encourage the believers.
It's letters to encourage, and there's instruction to teach, and there's instruction to exhort, and different things like that. Which, hey, man, that's great. But I think oftentimes what we've done is we've taken this idea of preaching and made it like the definition is our presupposition is it's a 35-minute message with X points behind a pulpit, and I'm not saying that's not good. Like there's a time and a place for that. I truly believe that. But where we've come on the other side now is rather than just monologues, we're trying to have dialogues around the word. The word is still our authority for faith and life. It's it. It doesn't go beyond that. But then rather than just listening to me speak or you speak or someone else speak, it's, hey, man, what is the Lord showing you in this? What are we learning about him? What are we learning about humanity? What do we need to do in light of what we're reading? And then you get people excited to actually go and live that out and wherever he's placed them.
How dangerous is the cult of personality? I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm going to ask it in sincerity and hopefully humility. But the cult of personality, if you're good on stage, then, I used to say, it's not hard to build a big church. If you can perform well on stage, you're going to have a crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, you can try as hard as you want.
Yeah.
But if you have a talent, and people used to say, my spiritual gift was speaking, to which I would say, no, my talent is speaking. A spiritual gift for me is more grace to love people because you get so frustrated with people, right? But how dangerous is this cult of personality? I mean, even in the smallest church, a guy can build a little church around him based on his personality.
Yeah.
And it's just a dangerous place.
No, it is, because at the end of the day, you become the king.
Yeah.
And I think the whole point of why we want to do what we want to do now is because Christ is king, and we want him to be king in everything that we do. And so have you seen any of these, and this is going to answer your question, but have you seen any of these behind the scene documentaries on like Hillsong and some of these major mega churches? So the only reason I bring that up, because again, I'm not like jumping on any bandwagon to bash these dudes, but when personality, and I will give you props in this, you did not although you became a big personality, you did not let that take you to some of the dangerous places of like being hungry for power that you see in some of these documentaries. But man, you watch some of these documentaries, and I think one of the latest ones that came out revealed some just investigative research. Whereas they did investigative research at the leadership structure at Hillsong, the investigator literally wrote in his notes, the leadership functioned like a frat party. And so why do I bring that up? Because I think when personality becomes king, the human nature is I am going to get drunk off of this power. And then that power leads me to get drunk off of other things that fill me and that exalt me again as king. And so I think that's what we saw, man. I mean, we didn't see that with you, but it's hard because what people do, you tried really hard, and I'll give you props in this, to not have it be built around you. But at the end of the day, it was built around you. Yeah. And that's just really hard because the only person it's supposed to be built around is Christ, which we all know.
Yeah, and it's what you believe and it's what you're trying to do. But the smartest thing we did was never engaging with social media at the height of what we were doing. Not everybody had their little Facebook pages, but I had people telling me, you need to be posting clips, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this.
You didn't buy into all that.
And I never had a social media account until I ran for mayor.
Right.
And the funny thing is when you look back, you go, wow. So there's nothing on record that somebody can say, you said this and you said that. But the funny thing is how many times where other preachers might get in trouble saying things from the stage, we learned so much about grace because of the people we were privileged to walk with,
right,
that we didn't bash culture. We didn't bash people who didn't believe or walk the same way we did. It was more, let's just love and honor each other. But this whole cult of personality thing, I mean, it's just, I think that's, I think it's what's led to where you are. But so talk more about Advanced Church.
Yeah, so, I mean, at the end of the day, I tell people this all the time, and you'll appreciate this. I'll be like, there's nothing we're doing that's sexy. Matter of fact, it is the opposite of sexy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it just is. And I say that just in the sense where it's not attractional. Like, what we do on a weekly basis is we gather in homes. We met at Second Story across from where we're filming for a while. But we meet in homes primarily throughout the week. And then once a month we come together and we try to celebrate what God is doing, hear testimonies, hear stories, be maybe a little more traditional in a monologue from the Word, but trying to just engage.
But not week in and week out.
But that's not the hard. Week in, week out, we're in the Word. But what we're doing is we're having a dialogue around the Word.
Right.
And the cool thing is, man, is like there are people that have gifts of teaching. I mean, there is. So like, and we make sure in all of our house churches that we have people that can keep the guardrails on, that can keep the boundaries, can take it back to the Word. But we're having a dialogue, and really what we're trying to focus on are obedience and sharing. And I think what I learned is that a lot of people, you know, in the modern day traditional church, we focus a lot on application. But then application becomes, I'm going to read things into here that aren't necessarily in here based on where I am in my unique season of life, rather than, did Jesus say to do something in this passage? Okay, what do I need to do? Like, I'm going to obey, and then I'm going to actually go and try to have conversations with other people about what he's showing me in the Word. I'm going to actually try to share it with people and engage with people, not in this weird way. And that's what I think. I watched you toward the end of your time at Stonegate push against some of the weirdness, because things just got weird. Like, people will get weird when they try to share their faith with people. Yeah. You know, whether it's the proverbial dude on the corner with the megaphone, or it's just like weird door-to-door stuff, rather than just like, hey, wherever I go, as you go, in my places, because clearly God has me in these places for a purpose. I believe that. You believe that. Man, I'm going to start building relationships. Right. And if it goes spiritual, I'm going to go spiritual. If I have a chance,
it's all spiritual.
Absolutely, but if it has, right. When you're the first person I ever heard say that, I remember sitting in a pew back probably 10 or 11, and you go, everything in life is spiritual. And I think because of the compartmentalized nature of things, people miss that. And so what I'm kind of thinking is, like, when we're out in the world and I have a chance to say, hey, man, we actually talked about that yesterday in my living room. We're reading the Bible and we opened up. We talked just about whatever it is. Right. Man, that's awesome. What made you bring that up? And just have conversation. And so that's really the heart of what we're doing in homes, and then meeting once a month, and then just trying to teach people to live out their faith wherever they are. You know, I've been convicted that it's just so easy to get inward.
Yeah, and it's so easy to equate Christianity with performance, like the simple things that people have done over the years that they think equals maturity. Right. For instance, and you know, one of my pet peeves is praying before a meal in public. Drives me batty crazy. I mean, because I think about what Jesus said when he goes, hey, when you pray, go in your closet. Yeah. And the Father who sees in secret will listen in secret. I mean, when you give, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Right. And I know people are like, well, people need to see we are Christians. I'm like, how? How do they need to see that? Is standing on the corner praying doing anything? Or is doing a deal when you're an accountant or you're an investor or you're, name your profession? How do you do that? How do you honor the souls that are marching around you, who are looking for something in life, in literally everything you do, and the way you do it, and the way you talk, and the way you talk about other people? And just because you bless a meal doesn't mean that all of a sudden a revival is going to break out in the restaurant.
Well, and I think that's one thing I'm really learning, Patrick. You know, as I was just thinking about our conversation today, I'm going back and I'm going, I mean, we have trained people to do a bunch of silly things like that.
Checklists so they feel better about their faith,
right?
Rather than the holistic nature of what grace means,
right?
Which means you got nothing in this deal, man. It's all grace.
That's right.
It's all grace that saved your soul, will keep you saved.
That's
and
right.
Until you get a grip on, what was it the Apostle Paul says? Those who have been forgiven much, love much.
Uh-huh.
But, this forgiveness is not just, oh my gosh, I'm a sinner. I'm saved by grace. I'm finally going to heaven. I'm not going to hell. Rather than realizing that the reason we sin is because we're trying to meet God-given needs in our lives, and we're pursuing them wrongly. But He's given us an opportunity to find life and find it abundantly. So how are you living that out in a way that someone looks at you and goes, there's something different about that.
Right.
There's something different about our conversation we had. Because how many people have you met, and I won't name names, that you're talking to somebody who really isn't a church person, and you mention somebody from the church who's a business person, and I've heard it multiple times.
And they cringe?
They cringe. They go, really? That person goes to your church? So they're a Christian? I mean, I'm quoting. Absolutely. I don't want any part of that. That's a completely compartmentalized life.
Right.
Dangerous.
Yeah, it is, and what it's dangerous because it's almost like sometimes we train people, like if you do certain things, like you pray before your meal, or you say certain phrases, or you know how to speak the lingo, and you show up to a building on a day of the week, then congratulations, you
listen
have
to
made
Christian
it.
music.
You have arrived, exactly.
Right.
And I think what I'm seeing is, although those things aren't bad things, like people
to be clear, nothing's bad.
They're not bad. It's not bad, but
Maybe.
it feels very cookie cutterish, and I'm going like, what I'm seeing is a lot of people aren't just equipped to live out their faith in the sense to where, like, man, I can engage culture with a biblical worldview. I can engage business with a biblical worldview. I can engage conversations with people I disagree with a biblical worldview. Wow. Why? Because I'm actually engaged in the Word on my own, you know? And I think that there's almost this, like, pervading mindset that Christians are just taking a bunch of L's, and the church is terrible, and I think the church as we know it is failing in some ways, and there's some things to be done. But Christianity, by and large, is exploding.
Oh yeah,
all over the world,
especially China, the house church. We had Bob Fu in here last time.
Even Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, India. I mean, like, Christianity is exploding. The kingdom at large is doing just fine, and it's advancing forward. And we got to teach people that that's what matters. Is, man, are you a part of seeing the kingdom advance?
Right.
But all too often, what happens is we get really worried about some of our subculture things,
and we become us versus them, rather than realizing, what's the phrase we always used to use? The enemy's the enemy.
Not people.
It is not people.
That's
you used
right.
to do people over pigs.
That's right.
You did.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that people ask me how I feel about the way the world is today, or the United States is, and I often say, well, I actually think it might be the most significant moment for the church in America.
That's
church
ever
being
been. Yeah.
followers of Jesus, not buildings on the corner.
That's exactly right.
Because now you're just going to get to see, are you going to first of all see that the people that are irritating you or making you the maddest, do you see them as literally created in the image of God? Their souls bear the image of their Creator. And maybe you heard me tell this story. We were talking before we came on the podcast about me going to Vegas, and people are always like, "You like Vegas?" I'm like, "It's actually one of my most favorite places on the planet." And they're like, "Why?" And it goes back to one story. I'm standing outside the fountains of Bellagio, and it's chaos. If you've ever been on the Strip, it's just cars everywhere, people everywhere. You know, there's a pretty good chance 80% of the population's inebriated. There's nothing really good going on. Probably. But we're standing in front of the fountains of Bellagio, and I remember the day this happened. And we're waiting, my wife and I are waiting to see the show. You know, the moon's out, sun's down, it's dark outside, it's probably 10 o'clock, and about every 15 minutes, I think, those fountains go off. And there's a little, you can tell it's getting ready to start, the fog goes over the water, and all of a sudden, you can look around those fountains, and unless you're in a car, every soul stops. And, it can be a Frank Sinatra song, whatever it is. And these fountains go off, and it becomes this most beautiful, orchestrated moment. And I remember I'd seen him so many times, so I'm just watching the crowd. And I remember my eyes going over the top and over the bottom where restaurants were. And I thought to myself, we are created to take pleasure in beauty,
right?
Created by a beautiful God. And here in what people would call the Sin City capital of the world, something beautiful makes people stop, which begs the question, is there anything beautiful coming out of our lives that makes people stop in the midst of hell and want to take notice? But too often, we miss the beauty and pay attention to the carnage in people's lives rather than the beauty that's really in them waiting to be unfolded in a meaningful life. But how do we do that?
Right.
And, when we have structured and formalized and professionalized what the church is supposed to be, and I fear so many young men and women are told they're called into full-time vocational ministry, probably because they're afraid to go out and do anything else in the world. And people are like, good, congratulations, that's really special. You get to go be a full-time vocational minister. But if the church just goes away, can they go make a living in this world and in living show a living gospel?
When if another pandemic happens, then what do you do? If churches can't quote unquote meet?
That's right.
One thing that's interesting, going back to your Bellagio comment, and you're just seeing the beauty in the world. Like what if someone who doesn't know God, what beauty are they seeing in Christians?
That's exactly right.
And here's where I keep going back. One thing that's so interesting is there's such a tension, and this, there's such a tension in knowing the truth, believing the truth, and you don't want to compromise the truth.
Sure.
You want to stand firm on the truth. But then again, the tension of how do I speak this truth in love, as the Apostle Paul says.
Yep.
But you know what I'm seeing lately, Patrick, is that, there's obviously people that label themselves Christians, that any chance they have, they want to beat people over the head with their Bible's a blunt object,
right?
Right.
Right.
It's a weapon of mass destruction, so to speak, which clearly that's not anything we're advocating. But what I've seen is when you take a stance for truth, but do it with gentleness and respect, and you're able to profess the hope that you have inside, that is beautiful to people.
Yeah.
We live in a divisive world, and people want to divide and fight. But what I've noticed is when you say, man, this is what I believe because it's truth, you don't get to create it. Truth is something you discover.
Right.
But at the end of the day, man, like, tell me more about you. Like, what, and you show an interest. You know their story. You care for them. And, I've had people that have asked me before, are you one of those pastors that, what do you think when it comes to, tough topics like transgender, homosexuality, whatever it may be? What kind of pastor are you? And I said, well, I'm a pastor that stands on the truth of Scripture, but tell me about you. Why do you ask that question?
Right.
What do you mean? And that is what I've seen that is beautiful. Like, I'll tell you a story. We had a guy went to Vegas for a jiu-jitsu competition, and guy's a little rough, and he's he likes certain words that he's using, hey, whatever. So everyone knows I'm a quote unquote, I air quote this, I'm a pastor.
Right.
We're walking, and he's talking with my wife, and me and another guy are behind him. We're like, man, what is he saying to her? Oh my gosh, this guy. Well, then it turns out she was tuning him up, because that's normally what happens with the women. But man, we just lived life with this guy for 3 days. Okay, he knows I'm a pastor. He would ask me cultural things, and I would never compromise from what I believe to be truth. But I don't think he'd ever had anyone that engaged with them and would laugh about certain things, would listen, would ask questions in return, would stand firm, but wasn't trying to destroy him.
Yeah. You weren't trying to bait and switch him, so
that's
you
exactly right. Not
prayer.
Once did I say, hey, I've got this house church meeting in my house every week. Right. You should come. Or not once did I try to get him to, hey, here's a track, whatever. Right. But we talked about spiritual matters. We talked about Jesus. We talked about the good news of the gospel. We did these things, but never in a way that was like, if you died tonight, what's going to happen? Well, that next week we get back, the guy gives me a call, and he was pretty verbal about his disdain with Christian things and how can you really believe the Bible and all this stuff. Well, he calls me that next week and goes, hey, do you ever do couples counseling? Couples counseling? What? Well, yeah, but why do you ask? Well, man, honestly, after spending the weekend with you and your wife, I just really see that if my relationship was going to be a certain way. I'd want it to be like yours. Huh.
Yeah.
That's really, really interesting,
right.
you know?
Right.
And so then we were able to start meeting with them, building a relationship, and eventually, you know, start reading the Bible and doing some really cool things. But it all just came from being present,
right?
Being relational, you know?
Have you watched,
and not compromising.
Well, and it's, you know, when you say not compromising, I remember someone asked me something about what I believed. And I said, well, I used to have this really, really, really long list.
Of course, yeah.
Of non-negotiable things that I thought were correct. Mm-hmm. And I said, the list has gotten substantially shorter. Mm-hmm. I'm substantially more committed to the smaller list. And so multiple other things are just, I'm not going to argue about those things. For instance, when is Jesus coming back?
Right.
You know, I don't know. And what about when you take communion? Different things. But, you know, just hearing the story you telling about this guy, have you seen any of those episodes of The Chosen?
I've seen a few. I haven't seen anything recently.
So I just started watching a few of them, and the very first one I watched was the episode where Jesus sets Mary Magdalene free. Did you see that one?
I don't think so, no.
So what's crazy about it is you're just watching this thing, and and they show her how she's supposed to be, demon possessed and everything.
Oh yes, I did see this. Okay,
and I'm going,
okay.
how is this going to roll out, man? How is this going to change? and then if you remember near the end when Jesus meets her,
right,
all he does is say her name.
Mm-hmm.
He just says Mary, and he knew her. I mean, I know everybody's like, Jesus created her. Great, I understand that. But how many of us know people's names,
right,
and want to build a relationship and love so much that I'll hang out with you, man. I just want to know your story. And if part of this Jesus comes out of me in a way that you want to know this guy, it's really not that hard. And it's just knowing, believing, receiving, confessing. It's just know him and walk with him and not earn anything. But you can know, just like he said her name. And it goes back to, again, everyone I'm going to be around, every time I go to Vegas or I hang out in Midland, he does know every single one of their names.
That's exactly right.
And, well, I take the time to honor who that person is. And the structure and the form is so dangerous.
Well, and I think it is because I think what happens is, I remember part of my soul detox, to go back to that, was I became so used to everything had to be about a crowd. Mm-hmm. And I'm not the guy that demonizes crowds either. Like, hey man, you get a bunch of people coming to something that is about Christ, man, that's great. Mm-hmm. There's opportunities for influence. But my mind became so programmed to want to build a crowd. So then I had to start looking at my heart and going, why is that the case? And you want to know what I found to be much harder? I mean, like, you would probably agree with this. It's really not that hard for me to speak to 1,000 people.
Easier. I'd rather speak to 5,000 than 5.
Even just
day.
One. I'm like, but when your paradigm begins to shift, because again, I will. There's a lot of things I attribute to you, but the paradigm thing turning me on to Stephen Covey and a lot of that. My dad even uses that in his leadership training at his company to this day. But it's all about paradigm and the way you see things. And once my paradigm became like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with crowds. Like, clearly Jesus spoke to thousands and thousands of people. But man, like, am I trying to build relationships with a few and engage those few to go engage a few and engage a few and engage a few? And so once my mindset switched and we started focusing on, like we had a couple that we did premarital counseling with and didn't get anywhere. It was just real surface. The very last meeting, we had this breakthrough moment. And I said, you know what, guys? Let's do your wedding, go to your honeymoon. Then when you get back, let's start meeting in my house.
That's what most of my marriage counseling has become. Not pre.
Yeah.
Because every answer is nearly fake.
Right.
But it's just, okay, once you get out of this dating and marriage mode, because you're not even thinking properly anyways, let's get on the other side of this. And then we'll do some life together.
Yeah, and we started meeting, doing dinner, reading the Bible together, just engaging each other, just talking. And I remember some of the comments were like, man, we've never seen people that actually like, you really believe this stuff? And like, you're really living it. And I'm like, well, it's not that we're special or doing anything different. It's just we believe that if Christ is truly king, that should affect all of my life, not just a day. And so...
Well, and think about how hard it was. You mentioned this, and then we'll maybe lighten up the topics here a little bit. you as a full-time crowd gatherer, and I don't mean that mean, we were doing what we were doing with, I think all of our hearts were
with the
right.
best of intention.
We never advertised. We never did anything on radio or television. We just did what we were doing.
We wanted them to hear about Christ.
Our hearts were pure, and we weren't doing anything untoward. You know, we never kept up with who the givers were. I think people never believed that when they'd say, who are your top 10 givers? And I'd be like, I have no idea. I never look at the records. I never look at the books. None of us did. But even to sit down and read your Bible, you know, as a part of my morning routine,
yes,
I was always in preparation mode.
Yes.
Of how am I going to speak this? How am I going to speak this? And now part of the detox is just read the word for your soul.
That's right.
And how do you do that? And you're not making notes or working on a message or whatever.
Well, now I'll read the Bible and I'll start seeing people's faces and going like, when I see Des at Natural Grocers, I'm going to encourage him with this today. Yep. When I see so-and-so at Jiu-Jitsu, I'm going to encourage them with that. I mean, I'm thinking more about the people than the performance.
Right.
And
That's a good way to put it.
Toward the end of my time at Stonegate, I remember getting up there, preaching messages and just feeling like something's not right. Something's not right. Like I was an actor in a play or something. You know, and I'm not. I'm not saying that it was because of anything that Stonegate did or the leadership did. I just remember personally that was my own personal wrestle. It's where I was, and I believe the word should be proclaimed. And there's a time and a place to open up the word, and we'll use the terms we were trained with, exposit it. Yeah. I'm good with that. That's great. But I think something about the form of what we were doing made it feel like to me like I was an actor in a play, and I really wanted people to like my acting rather than meet my king and want to follow him. And so I think what I've seen, Patrick, is as the form has changed, what's happened to me, it's not attractive in that sense. What's attractive is the relationships. Right. And please don't get me wrong. There are people that have come in and out of my house, in and out of our church, and they're in for a season. They're like, I'm out. Either I'm going to go back to the old way of doing things, or I just am not going to do anything, whatever it may be. So I'm not acting like we're killing it and we've got everyone.
It's just a different form.
It's a different form. And in that form, where I have found the most peace and what's been the most exciting season of ministry is I feel like I'm actually truly engaging people again, right? Like I'm truly like caring about people and wanting to know what's going on in people's lives. And
there's a shift taking place. You know, it's taking place.
I want to get to that.
Yeah, I mean, I did that study for nearly 18 months about what is happening around the globe. Yeah. And these people from Europe who were talking to me, they were from, not Europe, one's from Europe. Yeah. Europe, big case. I had one from Scotland, one from Australia, and others from Europe and the European continent. And they made this comment. They said, the American church is 100 years behind where we were. Because if you travel Europe now, you see churches being used, as old tourist buildings or hotels or hostels or whatever it is. And he said, you guys are just, it's going to happen to you slower than it's happened to us, because we were ahead of you by centuries anyways, in history. But he said, our churches did not start growing until we lost our churches. And the shift, it's taking place on the coastal sides. Yeah. The Bible Belt's a little slower to get around to this, where every moment is sacred. There's no such thing as a sacred secular split.
I agree.
There's going to be a great cleaning out of professional clergy. They're going to disappear.
Couple of things on that, and I want to ask you a question. Okay. This is actually a question I've wanted to ask you for a while, so I'll get there.
And then we'll talk about football.
And then we can talk about football. That we can wrap up our thing here. So the biggest things I'm seeing just church-wide, I'm seeing a few things. One, really, really interesting. I think your friends from Europe nailed that. I believe we're beginning to see, when they tore down the Western United Life building right here, they had to do a lot of pre-work before they imploded it. Yeah. I think we're seeing the pre-work of the megachurch implosion. Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of the pre-work. They're busting out windows. They're doing different things to make, and this thing is eventually going to implode. I truly believe that, not because in and of itself is bad. It can't satisfy and fulfill. There's just holes. And so I'm seeing a lot of people leaving, and a lot of young people are either going to more like historic expressions of the faith, like more like reformed things or whatever it may be, to where they're really going back to like the early church expressions, or people are going like, okay, what does the Bible say it means to be a church? Okay, let's do those things. And that may not be this big fancy gathering. That may not be this huge crowd, but we're going to live it out. And it may be a little bit more underground. And rather than the global population taking cues from the West is now going to have to start taking some cues from the global population,
right.
Learning from our brothers and sisters, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, China, and beyond. And I'm seeing that, and I'm seeing people just desiring more. And it's like, man, not just more in this weird, like, sometimes we say that, but they're just words, but it's just this like, and I'm seeing a lot of men wanting to lead their families better and feeling like sometimes church feels so weak. I don't know if you ever felt that. That's not my question for you.
What was your question?
Well, I'm going to get there. But I feel a lot of
I've
men.
resisted interrupting you because I want to make sure you keep the question.
I know you do. But I'm all of this is coming into what I think the state of the church is. My question for you is this. Do you think the church being ran more in a business fashion has contributed to this?
I think that the church started being run with a corporate mindset out of default, not out of
well said,
not out of any ill intent.
Okay.
I think there was a sense of, okay, we got to be on our game. We have to do this correctly. How do we put structures in place? And eventually, just like any company, a large company, you miss the people eventually. You miss who your customers are. You miss who your clients are. And you start thinking you're the center of attention. You start thinking you're the product, even though you're trying to preach the product. And eventually you just get in your own way. And,
that's right. Okay.
And so when customers are looking for something to meet their needs, companies have to stay focused on meeting that need and not trying to make themselves the center of it. And I think the church has gotten so ahead of itself where, and we're using this word church. Let's make sure we're talking about sort of the westernized megachurch. And a megachurch, remember, is about 300 or more. I mean, when you think about it, everybody thinks that Stonegate was this megachurch because 5,000 people every Sunday. Well, 98% of churches never pop 200, right?
That's right. That's
you have 500 people, you're a megachurch. But going back to your original comment about people are getting back to more ancient things, I think you've heard me say this before. I think everyone's soul is longing for a deep connection to the past and something that has stayed true and something that has stayed solid. You know, how come you can go to the store now and you can buy telephones that look like old telephones?
Isn't that crazy?
Or you could, or how about the craze of vinyl and turntables? And you just, there's always this sense of trying to reconnect with something that stayed. And the only thing that stays true and faithful is the Lord Jesus Christ.
That's exactly
in
right.
all of these things.
Right.
But at the heart of that is still love your neighbor and love God, which are, if we're going to boil it down, I think he said, these are the two things that matter. A lot of other things, but they all stem from these correct avenues of love. And we just, I don't think motives from, and I would say probably from the 70s is when there was really, after the 60s sort of craze, the Jesus Revolution, then Southern Baptists started growing and Methodists started growing, denominations and churches started growing. And it's only in this last 5 years that this is really, no, I take that back. It actually probably started in the 90s when President Bill Clinton ran for office. No, I take that back. It actually was when Reagan was president. And you have a moral majority.
That's what it is.
You have this church taking its stance. I can remember churches protesting over liquor by the drink, which just meant you could go to a restaurant and have a drink. So this moral majority American evangelicalism, you know, pops up with Reagan. And then we take our stands politically against Clinton because he's got to be the Antichrist, you know. And then George Bush shows up, and we think we've got an evangelical leader in the White House, and then you have 9/11, then what's culture going to do? And then you remember when Barack Obama's running for office, and you say, how does politics play in this? Because it's an expression of who we are and what we become. And then we're like, Barack Obama's a Muslim, and so now the world's going to come to an end. And then, you know, we end up in this season where now we have Trump, and then, you know, he's supposed to be the Christian's answer, and I was always telling people, kind of need to be kind of careful here, because if he'd run as a Democrat, everybody would have said, who's on the religious right, you can't vote for him because he's a Democrat and he's been married multiple times and owns casinos, and so you go through this whole thing, and where's that point leading? Well, has the salt of the earth, which is what the church is supposed to be called, have we lost our flavor? And is our influence only how mad we can get and who we can fight, rather than how well do we love that draws people into a gospel of truth? So it's not going to happen on the corner because you have a cute sign out front that says, you think it's hot here, wait till you get to hell. I mean, right. How many stupid things have we seen that people put on those billboards of their churches,
I just had one sent to me today that's because they're memes now, that said, man, it's too hot to change the sign. Sin bad, Jesus good, details inside.
Yeah. That's just, like, that came right off of... No, I think it's going to be interesting to see it change. Well,
let me ask you one last thing. I mean, I got you here. Why not?
Might as well.
I mean, I think this is good too, because, one thing, you look at statistics and you see a lot more, women attending churches, traditional churches, as what you and I have come out of on the other side. What do you think it is that is derailing men from being engaged, involved? I mean, I have a few thoughts, but it's kind of where, when I look at the sign of the times in regard to church, and I look at, some different things we've talked about, the megachurch maybe imploding, people are changing, church is a business, great intention, but maybe not the best long-term. Why do you think men haven't engaged, or maybe longing for more, or struggling sometimes, or maybe they're not as involved as the women are with current forms?
Honestly, I think it goes back to what Eldridge was trying to get at with Wild at Heart. I think that kind of got off the rails in some regards. But I think men want an adventure.
Yeah, yes.
I don't care if they're outdoorsmen or not. They want an adventure out of life. They want something more. I mean...
Yeah, we want to take ground.
They want to just be masculine in some specific way.
That's right.
And unfortunately... much of what is expressed of Jesus and the Christian culture is not masculine. It doesn't show a sense of great bravery or great courage.
Right.
That's so much different than like a Jonathan in the Old Testament.
That's exactly right.
Looking up at these Philistines, this enemy, and he goes, you know what? Let's just go pick a fight. Literally, that's what he said. Let's go pick a fight.
Maybe the Lord will show up.
Yeah, maybe God will show up. If not, we die. I love that, because when people are like, let's pray about that.
And then he looks around at the carnage of 20 people.
Yeah, and it changes the destination of
that's exactly
a current generation. And so I just think that men want something to stir their soul. That does not mean every guy has to have, a beard and drive an F-150 and be rough and tumble.
No.
There's something in their soul that longs for this manliness. And our churches have become quite feminine in some regards, but I think the feminine is absolutely important. And quite
100%.
frankly, in the church, we probably have some braver women than we do men. And then we have a men's revolt against women in leadership, because women just lead better than some of these guys. And so you have these professional ministers that say, women need to stay over here. And I'm like, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't open the doors on Sunday in some cases. So I think it's just this bigger appreciation of God created man and woman, not so we could have a fight in culture, but so we could have this perfect display of the divine, which is what that is. And so I think that you're just seeing I don't know what the revolution's going to look like. I'm reading a great book called The Fourth Turning that sort of shows some historical cycles. And I think we're about to enter a cycle where the next gen's going to be like, appreciate what you've done. We're not going to rebel against what you've done, but we're going to take another beachhead here, and we're going to take another stance forward. Most everything over the last 50 to 60 years has been a reaction rather than a well-thought-out response towards the advancement of the name and the cause of Jesus Christ. We're just reacting and responding rather than... And so without a vision, the people are perishing. Right. And I think the Lord is setting us up for a new vision that's not going to exalt one guy here, or another great best-selling book. It's just going to be a generational movement that says it's going to be different.
Yeah, and I can one last thought, because I totally agree with that. And, even as we've started this advanced church, one thing that I'm seeing, and I use this phrase all the time, is this is not a microwave. This is a crock pot.
Long time.
This is going to, and you had to teach me. One of your big counsels to me was slow needs to be your new fast. Like slow is fast. Like calm down, slow and steady.
Smooth and smooth is fast.
That's exactly right. And I know that the Lord has stirred and done a lot of things, taught me so much through my past experiences, been grateful for all of them. Love the megachurch environment I came out of, but see that the future is changing. And so slow and steady as we move forward, that's what we're preaching. And just a reminder that, man, it's about generations. And we may begin to start a conversation with my kids about, some change that we think needs to happen. But again, it's not advanced. It's all because we want to see the movement of Christianity continue to advance.
Yeah, do the right thing in the eternal moment that is today.
That's exactly right.
Do the right thing in the eternal moment that is today. Plant trees you'll never sit in the shade of.
But the heart, and that's the hardest reality, is because of the instant gratification nature of the world in which we live. It's hard, because even in our church sometimes, it can be hard not to look around and go, man, is God really moving? Are we really doing this? Do we need to change the play now? Should we?
Yeah, but always remember, He doesn't need us to do what He needs to do.
That's exactly right.
Just do what you're supposed to do while He's doing everything He's going to be doing.
It goes back to Blackaby, which we talk about 100 million times. Where's He working? Let's join Him where He's working. And if He tells me to burn my human-made playbooks of strategy and stuff, oh, man, we're done.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we know it's about the long game.
And can everybody we bumped into today have a little bit of, this sounds like a total Vacation Bible School thing, but in everywhere I go and everywhere I brush against people, will a little bit of Jesus just brush off of me. Right. And that's, all the way to the airports when my flight's delayed, which all of them are, or canceled. Yeah. How do I treat the lady who's talking to me, who everybody else is yelling at? How do I talk to the person at the hotel who everybody's griping at? How do I treat the person checking me out of the store? How do I treat a waiter or waitress? How do I have a conversation? Everything is game on.
Well, and the whole, really what I would call the theme of your life and ministry, no neutral moments. I mean, do you truly believe that?
Right.
I mean, like,
drives me crazy sometimes.
It does, because I mean, I'm in an Uber and someone asks me a question about Jesus, or you're going to an event and they know it's Christian in nature and they talk to you. Are you going to have the conversation? Are you going to be like, yeah, and try to turn the page, quickly, just because, I'm never going to see this person again? Or do you truly believe that every moment matters?
Yeah, it matters.
Make the most of every moment because the days are evil. I think Paul said
That's
that.
Right. That's right. Stop worrying about tomorrow. Today has enough concerns of its own. Live it well.
That's
Lay your head down tonight and say no reserves, retreats, or regrets.
And we may need like a part 2, part 3 of this conversation, because I think we covered so much ground. We may need to drill into a few things.
So this may never make the final cut, but on a very, what I think is deeply spiritual note, but probably not, the Pac-12 is gone.
I was about to say the Pac-12 has dissolved. 4 teams now.
4 teams.
That's wild, man. And did you see the Mountain West is probably going to assume them?
No, I just was listening on the radio this morning, and I'm just like, because, honestly, all I care about is that OU and Texas are going to the SEC.
That's right.
So, a little online wager here. What's OU Texas look like this year?
Man, I mean, it's hard, and I'm not trying to play Homer. I still think
but you're going to.
I'm going to. I think, Texas coming off an 8-5 year, 5 of those they were 2-5 with 1-score games last year. They lost some really close ones.
So did OU, with the exception of the Texas game.
Right,
we don't have a quarterback.
Right. I think Texas beats OU and goes 9-3 this year.
You think so?
That's my thought. We shall see. You never know. The Texas OU game. What's wild about that one is it's such a flip, because there have been really good Texas teams that have gotten beat by OU. And there have been really good OU teams that have gotten. Right. I remember not long ago. Man, I can't even put a year on it. But OU was much better than Texas. Texas won like 48-45. You remember that one?
Yes.
Where it was just back and forth. Yes. And I'm like, how is Texas doing this? Because they play up for each other.
Because it's that game.
It's that game.
Here's the funny thing about OU. So I have a few friends in the organization, and we were talking about when Bob Stoops became coach. So he comes in 99. Okay, he inherits a squad from John Blake, and they don't have a very good season. It's almost like the season they just had, like 5-7, 6-7, whatever it is. The next year, under the radar, nobody knows what's going on. they show up, they're not even in the top 25, and they win the whole thing. They win the Natty 2000 the next year.
It's like TCU this past year.
Exactly.
Didn't win, but win.
And so now you got this OU that, by the way, has a decimated squad because of that guy who's out at USC.
Can't even say his name.
I will not say his name. And so, and now they've had this great offseason, and I was talking to some folks in the program, and I was starting to bring this topic up, and here's what's funny. They all go, no.
We don't speak these
We're
things.
not talking about that.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's going to be great.
Again, make the most of every moment. We're just going to live in the day.
We're just going to live right
live
here,
in the
man.
day.
We're just going to live right here. But it's going to be a fun year. I can't wait, man.
College football is just so wild. I mean, because you never really know. Like, who would have thought TCU would be in the national title game? I mean, they got rocked.
Yeah.
But they made it to the national title game.
Nobody would have not gotten rocked.
Yeah, Georgia. There's really three beasts: Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State. In my mind, those are the teams to beat. They're really they're going to be hard.
You don't put Alabama in that category?
Man, honestly, I'm not going to be one of these guys that was like calling for the demise of Saban, but I think they're top 10, but I don't know that they're top 3. Alabama, I don't.
No, I don't
we'll see, because I mean Texas has got them second game of the year. I mean, I guess technically the third in Tuscaloosa, technically the third week of the college football season. We have a bye our first week, then Rice, then Alabama.
Right.
We'll see, but you know what's funny is I find myself these days I find myself cheering more for certain individuals.
Totally.
Like, I love Texas just because, I mean, call me a T-shirt fan, whatever. It's just kind of been something I was raised on, but I found myself cheering for Joey McGuire out at Tech. I really do, because I really like him. I really like his style. I like that he was a Texas high school football coach.
Yeah.
I like the things he says. You know what I mean? So I found myself rooting for little individuals here and there, and
that's why I root for Venables. I've gotten to watch the program, and I've talked to guys on the inside of the program who are like,
what kind of man
dude's the real
is.
dude.
Yeah,
man. Yeah. And there's some that aren't, some that aren't.
That's right.
And even what's your guys' coach name?
Sarkisian.
I mean, rough run, man. I mean, with his own life personally, and hopefully he's able to get on that track and stay on that track.
Yeah, and I think some people would tell you he's rounded a corner. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's just it's so
but it's coming
hard.
up, man. College game day.
It's coming up, and I'm so excited. But I think about like the Pac-12 and the dissolvement of that conference, and I just think like, man, it is. Again, it's a big business.
NIL and the whole 9 yards.
It is a massive business.
Wow, 18-year-old kids making a couple $1 million a year.
It's nuts.
And some haven't even played a down of college football.
That's exactly right.
And what's the number of kids in college football that are going to make it to the pros? Less than 1%?
It's a very small margin.
I mean, less than 1%.
But yet they're going to have big money when they graduate.
Exactly.
College.
But I would love, last thing I'll say, I would love to see the data on how many 4 and 5 stars never make it to the NFL.
Yeah, that's right.
It'd still be like 1%.
That's right.
And all the hoopla and all, they just wash out, man.
Well, it's just interesting, too, these guys that go, even some D2 guys or 1AA guys that end up being big-time NFL names. That's right.
They work hard. And,
it's
I've
wild.
seen kids who just work hard and make it happen. And
that's exactly
they'll get
right.
their education and do great things. So,
That's
we may
right.
have to do episode 2 here, man. I don't know what we'll
Man, that was a lot of
uncover.
fun. That was a lot of
We'll
fun.
see
I
what
think
it
we
is.
could, maybe we could drill down into one topic. So we'll see.
That's cool. Well, all right. I guess that's it.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate you doing this. So